Well, man, that we've talked about quite a bit here on the PHLY Sixers Free Agency Frenzy show with Derek Bodner and Kyle Neubeck along the way. Is now in the fold with the Philadelphia 76ers, according to reports, and that is Caleb Martin now agreeing to terms with the Philadelphia 76ers. Welcome to the PHLY Sixers Free Agency Frenzy show. This emergency pod is brought to you by Indeed. Listeners of the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/AllCity. That's Indeed.com/AllCity. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. And Derek, I think Daryl Morey might have gone the way of Indeed to bring in Caleb Martin to bring in. And I'm pretty sure it's a little bit more than $75. But hey, man, what a way to wake up this morning. The free agency period dried up a little bit. Has been pretty quiet. You talked about it on yesterday's episode of how the slop is no longer slopping. Well, we got some slop this morning. It's a good one.
Yeah.
It's a good one for the 76ers.
As generous as that $75 Indeed credit is, I don't think it's going to cover them on this one. In fact, according to Adrian Wojnarowski, it is a 4-year deal with $32 million guaranteed. So what that means, if there's nothing else, like if it's fully guaranteed, I guess is what I'd say, it would start somewhere in the $7 to $8 million range. What that means is the Sixers, I don't believe, I'd have to run the math, but I don't believe the Sixers would have to waive KJ Martin, which means the KJ Martin balloon payment is still in play. And that is a little bit of a hat tip to some cap nerdiness that I'm sure we will discuss in the days ahead, because that is sort of the next big domino to fall. But look, Caleb Martin is somebody that we had been talking about a lot. Like I said, we had one entire show dedicated to Hayward Highsmith and Caleb Martin. I think all three of us said that generally speaking, we would prefer Martin, but you thought it was more realistic to get Highsmith on a deal that you were comfortable with. Well, it turns out, and this was something where, look, Kyle and I, based on the conversations we had, were pretty confident that the Sixers were interested in Caleb Martin. There was some wavering confidence on whether or not they would or would not be able to get him at the price they wanted. But this was somebody who, we spoke, I can't remember because we've done so many podcasts, but we've spoken a lot about how, I think it was on our last show, about how sort of like this middle class of NBA role players are going to have to accept reality that the contracts they were accustomed to in the past are not ones that they're going to get. With the second apron in play, teams, as my cat is very excited about Caleb Martin.
Part of the show now. Part of the show.
Teams are going to, here, say hi. There she is. Teams are still going to pursue stars, but they're going to have that second apron, which is functionally a hard cap. And some of these players who were previously getting, Caleb Martin's previous contract was, I think, for more than this, somewhere in the $7 to $8 million per year range.
When he opted out, it was 7.1.
Yeah,
I have it right here.
It was pretty much the exact same one, just more years added on. And you had referenced that he was looking at one point for a $15 million per year extension. Players like Caleb Martin getting $15 million per year is going to be rare in today's NBA. And I think he sort of accepted that. I think he came to a spot where he knows he's going to get minutes and have a role and a chance to contend. But this is also a long-term deal. If it is a 4-year fully guaranteed deal, this is a long-term commitment. So I think this is a good player to get. He's not a perfect player, which is why he's being slotted in that $7 to $8 million per year range, but he is a useful player. And on a team that was, when we started talking about it, like who's your fifth starter before this, it was probably 35-year-old Eric Gordon, or however old he is. This is a key addition.
It certainly is. And this episode is also brought to you by our good friends from Rothman Orthopedics. Rothman sponsoring us throughout the NBA draft, now this free agency frenzy, and also sponsoring us through our summer league trip that begins for us on Tuesday. But yes, Derek, you're absolutely right. We all agreed that while we liked both of those players, we thought it was more feasible that they would land Hayward Highsmith because of the money part, because of what him opting out at $7.1 million for Caleb Martin. But there was no way that he was going to get a contract that he wanted from the Philadelphia 76ers after all of the things that they needed to do. So with it now, adding this player and looking at him, one of the things that we talked about with him was the fact that he had that out-of-body experience against the Boston Celtics in that series in the Eastern Conference Finals 2 playoffs ago. He was tremendous in that series. Thought he might get paid after that one. He did not, of course, because of how the language in the CBA with his contract was that he did not do that. But he didn't really follow it up the way that you thought. And then, we're talking about an 82-game season, too. It's not just a 7-game series. following that up. But he was good enough, averaging 10 points and still being able to make a difference with that basketball team. A lot of injuries where Jimmy Butler was out of the lineup quite a bit. Kyle Lowry eventually traded. Uh, so many players in and out of that lineup that he was probably asked to do a little bit too much, Derek, in the role that he had for Eric Spoelstra's team. And in this particular case, coming here now, look, we cannot predict injuries, but if we are just simply slotting him into the starting five with Oubre and George at the wing position, and the switchability that we discussed before, which is going to be crazy and fun to just watch and see how it all plays out, then that's what his value is, to a do it all, do everything type of guy that can shoot the ball, can get hot from time to time. We have more confidence in him that he could put the basketball on the floor a little bit more than Haywood Highsmith on a closeout situation. We know, of course, he can finish in the fast break. And there is that possibility that he can get hot. But he is also brought here more because of his defensive ability to go along with Oubre and George and what they're able to do. The switching that they can do now with this basketball team when they're hunting Tyrese Maxey, that's the only one that they're probably going to hunt now and see if they can take advantage of in the starting five, in that starting unit, because of how good they are defensively. I'm not trying to make him out to be Kawhi Leonard as a defender,
No,
but
he's not.
as a
Yep.
team defender with Joel Embiid behind him, alongside of Kelly Oubre and Paul George, the value is really really good for Caleb Martin. Then you add that toughness that we spoke about, that I spoke about it more than you guys, and I don't want to put that on you. I am that one that I'm like, yeah, I want some nastiness in the locker room, and with that nastiness now on the floor, he is one that will not step away and back away from a challenge. You bring that with Kelly Oubre, who showed a little bit of that, a lot of it with the referees, where he told him about the aunt and the uncle and the grandma and the mom and all that stuff when he laid them out and got that fine. But I like the toughness that he does bring. He's not going to come off the bench. I see Casper the Ghost saying he should come off the bench. Right now, with this particular group that they have, he is a starter. Oubre is a starter. Unless they do something else, these two guys are going to be in the starting lineup with the other three, and this is how it's going to look. Now, we have to see it on the floor. We have to see how it plays out. But for the $7 million that he opted out, and to now get a 4-year, you said 32, to make that an $8 million deal, I think 4 or 5 days later, this is a really, really good pickup for the 76ers to get this kind of value, this kind of bargain at this late stage of free agency.
Yeah, and I think what you brought up, like, look, he's not exceptional at really just about anything. Like, he's not an exceptional defender. We spoke in the previous show that
Mm-hmm.
Highsmith was probably a better pure one-on-one defender, but he's pretty competent at a lot of things. He can shoot a little bit in the playoffs. He can shoot a lot of it. Not sure I necessarily trust that to happen every year, but it's happened in 2 years in a row, so we'll see. He can attack a closeout a little bit. You're not going to put him in a pick and roll and ask him to create a whole bunch.
Right.
He can defend a little bit. He's not a lockdown, but he's a pretty good team defender, and he's at least competent. I think that's one thing that's sort of like intriguing me about this roster now. When you start looking up and down, and people are like, "Oh, he's not a power forward. He's 6'6". That's true. He's 6'6" with a 6'10" wingspan, though, so he can defend bigger players pretty well. He's not a pure power forward. He's not going to solve the rebounding problems. But what intrigues me is the combination of switchability in Kelly, in Paul George, in Martin, in Ricky Council, quite frankly, who I
Yep.
think can still have a role. Having those four players who can switch pretty much anything on the perimeter and have the physicality to compete, I'm real intrigued by that, especially because two of those players don't take anything off in terms of shooting. They can at least space the floor a little bit. So I've been desperate for wings. We were making jokes at the start of free agency that the only wings the Sixers had were the ones that, or the only wings we had during the live show were the ones that Vince bought us to eat in the studio. Well,
For
now the
sure.
Sixers have some wings,
Yep.
and
And you include Ricky Council, as you mentioned, in that.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So that intrigues me. What also intrigues me is, look, Martin's 3-point percentage over the years has been up and down. 35, 36% in the regular season, upwards of 40 in the playoffs. What's always sort of intrigued me is that his catch and shoot numbers, especially unguarded, have been pretty strong. Like this past year, he shot 44% on unguarded catch and shoot jumpers, which is a 63% true or effective field goal percentage when you factor in the added value of a 3-point shot. Previous season, it was 45% of on unguarded catch and shoot jumpers, which again would be in the mid 60s effective. That's a pretty big jump from where it is when he is guarded. Like
Yep.
last year, he shot 32% on guarded catch and shoots. So 32% guarded, 43% unguarded. There's usually a jump, but it's usually not quite that drastic. And also, he's a guy who 60 to 65% of his attempts over the past couple of years of his catch and shoot attempts have been with a hand in the face, in part because Miami doesn't necessarily have a true initiator. It doesn't have a guy with really elite gravity to force those rotations and get you easy shots. Jimmy Butler's great, but he doesn't really have like Joel Embiid level gravity. So I'm interested to see if Caleb Martin can be a little more consistent as a 3-point shooter next to Joel Embiid, next to that two-man game with Embiid and Maxey, because he
Yeah.
has a little more space and because he's unguarded attempts have been pretty good over the last couple of years.
Find him in the corner, man. That's it. Short corner
That's
threes.
honestly the weakest part. Like, he's been pretty much
He's
a
better at the
thirty-three,
wing.
34%. Yeah, he's like the wings. He's been
Okay.
pretty consistently more effective from the wings, and I think part of that is because he settles for some off the dribble jumpers, whereas here he might be more of a pure pick and or more catch and shoot. So I'm curious whether he can get comfortable in that changing role.
All right. So we also talked about with the fact that you just mentioned the creation from Joel Embiid, that with this particular play and Caleb Martin, we wanted more ability to dribble the basketball in the starting lineup. This does not do that, but it does give you a lot of different stuff. So, do you have a little bit of concern there where Maxi and Embiid are your primary guys, of course, but Paul George, the addition there, he is a guy who is going to handle the ball. So, 3 out of the 5 you can count on in terms of shot creation, ball handling, etc.
Yeah, I mean, look, I would love to have one more in terms of shot creation. I would love to have a little more ball handling. Those players, especially if they're not taking something drastic off the board somewhere else, like shooting, like like get out of the stop. They're not here to see you.
But
Um,
they are. But
they
they
are.
are.
Uh, I would yeah, like I said, if you can get you're not gonna get that for the minimum, for sure. You're not gonna get that for the contract that Caleb Martin had. It's
Hmm.
tough to find those kinds of players, like I said, who don't then take something else off the ball. I would love it if let's put it this way, if this was prime 27-year-old Paul George, I wouldn't have too big of a concern because Paul
Right.
George is 34. Yeah, you'd
Hmm.
love to have another option. I'm just not sure, outside of maybe Kyle Lowry coming back on a minimum. And
Yep.
look, we saw that Kyle can be overtaxed given the role that Nick gave him last year, but still just a
You
competent ball handler
put
would
him in
help.
the right role, though. Less
Yep.
minutes, probably more effective.
Maybe they can get Terry Johnson to come back. We'll see. But yeah, they could certainly use another backup point guard.
Yeah,
I'm curious to
yeah,
see how many people will get that reference, but I'm not going to explain it.
yep. You should. Terry Johnson. Just Google it. We still like him though. It's all good. Hope they bring
Oh no,
either
I
Kyle.
probably like him more.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Bring Kyle or Terry Johnson back, and all will be good. I still like Dennis Smith Jr. too if they strike out on those two. But there's a lot to like with this particular deal. Adding to it, we can get to Ricky Council when we talk about him more in Vegas and his role potentially going forward. Now that you had these more wings, maybe there's some more confidence in what they actually see in Ricky Council too, with the way that they're putting this team together. Derek, the other move that Woj reported was something that we discussed quite a bit also, which was Paul Reed probably being waived due to this move. Now that you see that, as far as the numbers, the 7.7 million that we've discussed, does this bite into that 77.7 million that we discussed with Paul Reed? And sorry to see him go.
Yeah, no, it's pretty much a one for one. In order to make that Caleb Martin signing, they had to waive Paul Reed. We had been, speculating how the Sixers would move on from Paul Reed for a week or two now. Like I said, there was an option where they could trade him and get significantly back up to $15 million back in return in a trade. But if they take back more in a trade than Paul Reed's salary, that would have hard capped them. It was an option, but it wasn't one I expected Daryl Morey to pursue because I don't think he wants to be hard capped at that first apron. So they found a way to get the guy that they want or a guy that they want at a price that they could fit into the cap space. So by waiving Paul Reed, you get that cap space back. Um, that's not always the case in the NBA because the Sixers are where they're at. They were able to be flexible. So yeah, I think the next shoe to drop becomes we're on KJ Martin watch now, like I said to start the show. See
Yeah,
whether or not they can give him that balloon payment. Not so much. I don't think they would use that for a sign and trade now, but maybe something coming towards a mid-season trade, whether that's after December 15th, whether that is at the trade deadline. But I think gaining that flexibility from that contract in a KJ Martin deal is what we will be watching next. But they're pretty much out of cap space now. They have what they're going to do with the KJ. They've already used their room mid-level on Kelly. So now it just becomes minimums or, what they do with KJ.
So what does that balloon look like with KJ now? Before we were talking somewhere in that double digit range in terms of 10, 15, maybe even higher million for him. Does that balloon payment look more in the single digits of the millions, or are we talking still that big number?
Why
Potentially,
why
potentially.
why are you counting KJ's money, man?
Well, I'm
You don't
sorry,
don't 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 don't
I want him to get a good. I want
don't
him to
be
get a good.
W, don't be counting his money. It's alright.
You're right. You're right.
Keep
You're
keep
right.
it in the bag. It's
I
fine.
just don't want him to have to go to Indeed to look for a job. So if he can stay here and
Yes.
get a good payment, then he's here.
No, look, one of the concerns with, doing a KJ sign-in trade is his outgoing salary, because of base year compensation, will only be 50% of his actual salary, but if you sign him and keep him until the trade deadline, BYC rules don't apply, so you can sign him for $15 million and he counts as $15 million outbound salary in a trade, so I would
Yeah.
guess if they do end up trying to pursue a mid-season trade, and I do think getting Martin now decreases the odds that they will try to do something with KJ Martin's contract now. So I think it's probably more likely to be a signing and then a midseason trade rather than a sign and trade. So because you don't have to worry about the BYC rules, I do think it, you know, puts you in maybe the 10 to 15 range, but you quite frankly want that contract to be substantive enough that you have the ability to match without being so much that you can't aggregate it and risk going over the first apron, and certainly can't risk going over the second apron. So I'd have to do the math. I actually think they're going to be right at the first apron threshold, give or take a couple million under. Yeah, they should be a couple million under first apron threshold after they finish off all of the moves that they've already agreed to. So now the key becomes staying under that second apron in a KJ Martin deal. And I'd have to do the math to figure out exactly where that falls. But I would guess somewhere in the 10 to 15 range.
Okay. Yeah, and look, that's good for him. I mean, this is a guy that a second round pick, second round deal, not making a lot of money, comes in here last year on a deal, and you look at him, and now he's going to be able to take advantage of a situation, right? Being in right place, right time, get that balloon payment, and I'm not counting his money, but good for him because he did show some things though for at least the first half of the season. However long he would be here, he showed some things where he could be a part of the rotation. And to your point, then if need be, they can move him a little bit later down the line. Just to kind of close things out as we look at this roster right now, starting five, if we were to go that way right now, Derek, would be Tyrese Maxey, Kelly Oubre, Paul George, Caleb Martin, and Joel Embiid. Eric Gordon with Andre Drummond, and also looking at Jared McCain, Adem Bona, and Ricky Council. The fourth, that's 10 players right now that they
Mhm.
currently have without and still with some roster spots to fill out, knowing that they have the two ways there, but also needing to fill out some players on some minimums that we talked about. Kyle Lowry, campaign, Marcus Morris, we discussed on Friday's show. That's pretty much all that's left here, right?
Yep. Uh, Daryl Morey has traditionally liked to come into the season with 14 players under NBA contracts. So you laid out the 10, so four more minimum signings. One of those minimum signings could end up being KJ, like we talked about with the balloon payment. So maybe KJ and three minimum signings, something along that line. But yeah, that sounds about right. Like I said,
That's
unless there is a KJ sign and trade, I would expect this to be the last significant move, the last move that you will sit here and get excited about. That's not true because there's a lot of minimum salaries that people stand
yeah,
for and become excited about.
yeah.
But this is like the last. Oh, I'm confident this guy's going to be in the rotation signing. Let me phrase it that way.
Especially with the name value when it comes to
Yeah.
Caleb Martin. Yeah. Yep.
Yep.
I agree with you 100%. We got a couple of super chats though, man. In regards to the middle class contracts going away, I think KCP is very happy with the contract he got this offseason. That's from Corey KCP with 3 years, $66 million deal with the Orlando Magic. And if I'm not mistaken, Derek, that third year is a player option for Contavious Caldwell Pope.
Sure, he's happy, but I think if you would have gone to projections before the summer, I think a lot of people were projecting more. I think there were people projecting, 20 to 25 over a 4-year deal. So 3 for
Yeah.
66 it's solid. And KCP for a role player has a track record that, most role players don't have. Like he's got the 2 titles. He's been part of multiple different organizations where he's been a key role player. It is, Caleb Martin's not, no one's expecting that. So I don't necessarily think that this proves a middle class being squeezed a little bit. I think he's pretty much an exception.
Okay. Ryan Z, I wasn't expecting to sign Martin today. How much does this hurt our chances with Dorian Finney-Smith?
Yeah, it certainly hurts. Like outside of a Yeah, no, Paul Reed and using his salary in a trade to help salary match that was key to it. I'm not gonna say it completely takes it off the table, but it pretty much takes it off the table.
hmm it's all about now the trade deadline. If anything happens
Yep, I
in
think so.
regard to another name like that, appreciate it, Ryan. Holy cannoli checking in with us on this Saturday morning. Could they have traded Paul Reed to get something back in return, or was there no market for him or cap space issue if they did that instead of waiving?
Well, Paul Reed was on a non-guaranteed contract, so the market for Paul Reed is pretty much irrelevant. You can waive him and reclaim that salary. It wasn't so much market for Paul Reed as it's the reality that if you take back more in a Paul Reed trade than you send out, you become hard capped. So there's really not a whole lot of functional benefit if you're coming under the premise that you are want to avoid that hard cap at the first apron under all costs, then there's not a whole lot to be gained by trading Paul Reed instead of just waiving him and using that cap space. So, I don't think Paul Reed was a positive value in a trade. It was really about using his salary to match another salary, using his non-guaranteed salary to match another salary. But since doing so and going up, like I said, taking back more than his salary would have hard capped you, I just felt like that was going to be a non-starter for Daryl Morey. So I think that's why they pursued a waiving and a signing rather than trading Paul Reed.
All right. Well, look, man, all things considered, with this basketball team, Daryl Morey and the things that he's done, not a bad offseason so far for Daryl Morey. He has to do some more things around the margins, as we talked about with those minimum contracts, including KJ Martin. But so far, so good with what Daryl Morey has done. Nice addition, nice team that he has put together. Still some things to do, though.
Yeah. No, and look, he wasn't going to build a perfect roster in the summer. And part of the reason why I think the KJ balloon to midseason trade is more likely is because Daryl Morey's just pretty comfortable going into a season without a perfect roster. He has said that publicly time and time again. He has proven that with his actions. And now that you have Paul George, now that you have Caleb Martin, I would guess his comfort level in delaying a move is probably higher than it was before then. So I think right now it's probably about trying to maximize flexibility, which is why this sort of KJ Martin wrinkle in the collective bargaining agreement is one that I think a lot of people think it has a real chance of happening. But in terms of I think he did a good job this summer, probably about as good as you could have hoped for. If you would have told most people a month ago that the Sixers, the cap space plan would have yielded, Paul George, Caleb Martin, Kelly Oubre coming back, I think most people would have signed up for that. And it maybe got a little bumpy there after the Mikal Bridges trade when you saw a rival and a team that knocked you out of the playoffs get better, when you saw an option come off the board, and when you still didn't believe that the cap space plan would yield anything fruitful. But I think this is probably about as good of a summer as you would have hoped.
Yep, absolutely. Well, this emergency pod was brought to you by Indeed. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at indeed.com/allcity. That's indeed.com/allcity. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Indeed, you do.
There's still some places out there that certainly need Indeed.
By the way, I give you a lot of credit. Whenever I say Indeed, I have to consciously think not to say Embiid because I say Embiid so many times.
Yeah, we
It's
do.
also
Yeah.
like when you try to embed something in a web page, instead of typing EMBED, I type Embiid like at least 75% of the time. So I give you a lot of credit for that, buddy.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. But I did like how you dropped in the Indeed you do, just like they do in the commercial. So that was perfect as well. And don't forget, folks, that our shows here during the summer have been brought to you by our good friends, presented by Rothman Orthopedics. If you are a weekend warrior like myself and you like to get out there, play some hoops, maybe bang up a shoulder or knee or something along those lines, it's not just the surgery like I needed. You can get an MRI, you can get checked out, things of that nature, x-rays that you just need to go check out our good friends from Rothman Orthopedics. And they're not letting us go, Derek, because we have two more super chats
Yep.
in here on this Saturday morning. People seem to be jacked up about the offseason. They like
Yeah.
Caleb Martin. They don't think maybe he should be starting, but they're okay with the news.
And I don't disagree with that. Like he's not a
Yeah,
locked in, but the problem is the Sixers have three locked in starters and three players who can start in a pinch. Well, you're going to have to start two of them.
yeah. And we will talk about maybe some more, maybe different lineup possibilities just because you do want some rebounding and some length at the power forward position. we'll get to that a little bit later, maybe starting on Tuesday while we're out there. Maybe we'll get some more news in Las Vegas. But Sway says, am I the only one who thinks we're too small and need a power forward? Just like we talked about.
Yep. No,
Appreciate it, Sway.
I don't disagree. But I think you're pretty big on the wings, which helps. But yeah, you could use one big body as a power forward. I'm down with that.
Yeah, no question about it. We're not dismissing that at all. We're just talking about, as you just laid out there, for what he had to work with. Adding Paul George at such a big number, yeah, you do need to go find that. But working with what he did have to work with, somebody mentioned to me in Twitter, and I apologize for not remembering who it was, but they brought up Christian Wood, and I'm like, yeah, I'm just not doing that. I'm not a Christian Wood fan. I'm out. Even at a minimum, I just can't do it. Just don't. I just think he's too lazy. While the size is there, is he going to get you the rebound that you want? Is he going to do those things? And right now, he's probably a center in the NBA anyway. So for him, and so I'm out on a player like Christian Wood. If they did it, I understood because we're talking about the addition of some much needed size in the front court. But not a player for him like him. For me, I'm out.
What a wild career arc for Christian Wood. Went from like undrafted to had to spend like 5 years trying to build himself up to
Hmm.
huge contract to now being minimum salary guy again.
Yeah, it's and you know what
Because
it
he's a
is.
talented dipshit.
Exactly. So when I say no, all of the stuff all of the attributes and the profile, all that stuff, you look at it and you say, this guy should be a good basketball player, right? And then he's Christian Wood. He thinks he's better than he is. When he's out there, he doesn't hustle enough and do all the small things that needs to be done. The scoring is cool, but you need the other stuff on the other end because you're not that guy. And that's what
Yep.
hurts him
No,
ultimately
I
in the
remember
end.
when he signed that big contract. Who did he sign that big contract for? Was that I forget who it
Dallas.
was. Dallas?
Yeah.
I remember talking to someone around Christian Wood, and we were talking about how he was, here on a 10-day, yada yada. The Sixers miss a chance. I like Derek, just flat out, he was not ready to be a basketball player yet.
Yeah.
I'm not sure right now he's ready to be a basketball player yet. He sort of got that payday and reverted back to his bad habits. I remember he was it UNLV? I think it was.
UNLV. And I liked him coming out of UNLV. When they signed him as an undrafted guy, Derek, I liked the idea.
Well,
I
I
really
remember he was like 6'8", weighing like 190 pounds with a 16% body fat. And people I had talked to were like, he never saw the gym. He never, ever, ever saw the gym at UNLV. He was skin and bones and fat, and that was it. And it was a really weird combination. It was just he did not put in the work.
he did not. No, he got comfortable. Once he got that contract, he
How are
got
we?
comfortable.
Yeah, yeah. And
And remember,
I
remember the
don't know
last the
how.
last year of that Dallas deal, there was a possibility of him extending with Dallas, but the word was he was asking for way too much money, and he went on into free agency, and he signed that deal with the Los Angeles Lakers that was not up to his liking,
Yep.
and then he was eventually benched again,
Yeah.
and
Played
now
17 minutes per.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So no, thank you to Christian Wood. I'll pass on that one. 7-footer and all. I'll pass on that one. Brian Pumper says, safe to say, Derek, tracking Twitter, following is 2 for 2 so far.
Yeah.
Now we got the Rico Suave on the squad.
Twitter, Instagram. It seemed like Instagram was another place that you got to track now. That seemed like it foretold some moves. But yep, that's just
Paul
another
George,
part of
man.
being a fan.
It's the
Yep.
Paul George effect. Paul George
Absolutely.
effect. Yeah. And Ash Monroe with our last super chat, starting lineup upgrade from last year to this year seems huge. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. No, look, they got Paul George. Of course, it's going to be huge. But
Hmm.
yeah, no, that is a very significant upgrade. And like I said, they have 3 locked in starters, a couple more who can start in the right situation. It would be great to upgrade one of those maybe with an in-season trade, but just the fact that you have Paul George and players who fit, yeah, I think this is a very substantial upgrade.
No question about it. Well, we get a substantial upgrade in weather that we did not want in terms of the heat and the
I was
temperature
gonna
that
say,
we're
I'm not sure if
expecting.
LA weather or if Las Vegas weather is an upgrade. It's
It's
certainly
it's it's
hotter.
an upgrade
Yeah.
because it's hotter, but it's not an upgrade that we desired. We will be in Vegas beginning on Tuesday with Team USA, and we saw some of the videos of the guys arriving yesterday, all of them, because Joel Embiid and company are there for their training camp that starts today. We will be there beginning on Tuesday, and we cannot wait to see what happens with Joel Embiid with Team USA. The exhibition game will be played on Wednesday. We'll be there for that. And then we get our coverage going for the summer league, and that starts on Friday with the Sixers playing their game on Saturday. So that's the next time we'll catch up with you, unless Derek something else pops up that causes this the cause for us to have an emergency pod, or all three of us here, or four, including Bree, producing here today, to have this emergency pod. Kyle will be back with us then, and we appreciate all of you for checking in with us, because this is another fun one. This is a good one. It's been a good offseason for Daryl Morey and the Philadelphia 76ers. Another much needed player added to the roster. Another wing. As Derek said, we were talking for years about wings, and more wings. They have a number of wings right now on this basketball team, and it doesn't seem like they've added any bad ones at all.
Yeah.
So we appreciate everybody for checking in on this Saturday morning, whether you're at the beach, in your backyard, on the front porch, in the kitchen, whatever you're doing, just sitting there having your coffee. We thank you for checking in with us. For all of our great people, we will see you on Tuesday. We're not going to go through a roll call here because, we typically don't, unless Derek wants to do a roll call, we typically don't run the roll calls. But we will say, please like and subscribe to the show. We've been knocking out these shows day after day after day, 1 or 2 shows per day because of the off-season moves. And we appreciate really all of you checking in. So again, like, subscribe, pass the word, tell everybody about us. We have some great content, we hope, coming to you from Las Vegas beginning next week. And when you do like and subscribe, you will get an alert that sounds pretty much like this. And you'll know that it's time for a PHLY Sixers podcast, or in this case, the PHLY Sixers Free Agency Frenzy show. For Derek Bodner, for Brianna, for Kyle, for Derek's cat, I'm Devon Givens. We'll be back with you on Tuesday. Everybody have a great, safe rest of your weekend. We'll talk to you on Tuesday.